Hi, everybody. Mason here. Welcome back to the Accelerating Lower Middle Market Value podcast. Today's guest is Layton Johns. I am super excited to have Layton Johns here. Layton is one of our newest CFO advisors on the Brady CFO team. But big part of the reason, Layton has joined our team and I am so excited. Layton and I have known each other for years. That Layton was one of those guys that, we stayed in touch with over the years and always wanted to find a way to work together. But really, really appreciate him joining the team, especially his construction background and knowledge. Layton actually, he graduated from Oklahoma State University. He majored in accounting and finance, and he held various industry roles in tax and private industry. And this is what I appreciate is he has both a public accounting background, but also a private company background. And so he actually started his career at Grant Thornton and then went on to EM Tharp and eventually Pro Citrus Network, which is where Layton and I got to know each other in the agricultural industry. And then eventually Layton ended up being the controller and VP of operations and finance at Webb and Son Construction. And Webb and Son Construction is actually a family business, and Layton is a fourth generation builder in that family business. And so Layton comes with a lot of deep knowledge and expertise in the construction industry from operating in that business, but also just being part of the family. And he is now a CFO advisor at Brady CFO. Layton is extremely passionate about the construction industry. Sometimes Layton, he shares with me, some personal podcasts, that he loves that are very much so focused on the trades and construction industry. And it's the type of stuff that he geeks out on. And so, yeah, really appreciative to have Layton on this podcast, on this episode, to talk about the best practice financial management tips for construction business owners. So thank you for joining us, Layton.
Well, thank you for having me, Mason. Glad to be here.
So Layton, really grateful to have you here. Tell us about your personal journey. That we'd really love to hear about your story, especially you came from public accounting, you've recently worked in the construction business. You have a lot of broad, experience and background, but really want to hear more about you intimately. What makes Layton Layton?
Yeah, of course. It's been kind of a winding journey for me. I grew up around my family's business and had it from day one that I wanted nothing to do with the family business. And so ventured out into public accounting. It was a great base for my career, but I really was not a fan of the busy season hours. It really took a toll pretty quickly, and I decided to jump back into industry. Had some great opportunities to work for some really good sized companies as I started my private journey. EM Tharp, Golden State Peterbilt in the Central Valley, California, as well as Pro Citrus Network. Got to see Pro Citrus grow quite a bit in the years that I was there with them. And at that point, I kind of started getting the itch to see where I could make my mark on the family business. I decided to move back over and help get us out of a little bit of a slump that we'd been experiencing for several years.
Great. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about family. Tell us a little bit about what personal life looks like for you.
Yeah, so I've married, wife of 11 years, Lauren. We were actually high school sweethearts, met at the county fair. It's kind of a great little story. We got two boys. Most recently, Jensen, he's about 4 months old now, and Jasper is 8 years old.
Jasper's in baseball, right? Is he? What position is he playing right now?
Outfield. Yeah, he's still picking it up. We've been trying lots of different sports with him: football, basketball, baseball. I think basketball is the one he likes the best, but he's definitely got cursed with the Johns genes when it comes to height.
There we go. Well, yeah, great to hear a little bit about you, Layton. Yeah, so let's dive in here. We like to talk about especially these construction topics and offer to our listeners a lot of your experience and insights to the construction industry. So yeah, let's kick it off. In your recent experiences this year, especially this year, what is your number one piece of advice that you would offer to the owner of a construction industry business? And can you share a story about why that's the first thing that comes to mind that really what's top of mind that you're thinking of, especially with your background in construction and, you operating as a CFO now, what's one thing that is hitting your brain immediately right now?
Yeah, so I've had conversations that have been similar in nature with a lot of different sub trades where they're new to ownership of the business or they've been running it for a number of years, but they've never really developed identity for their company. A lot of the companies I see that have had a lot of success really did a good job creating a culture and company identity about what their ultimate goal was. Were they going to grow a very large company that was going to dominate their sector in a given region, or were they building this company to sell, or was this something that they're trying to nourish from one generation to the next? And it's really come down to being able to identify what that is and make that a part of your personal identity. I've got, in varying situations, I've got one subcontractor that I've worked with. He's a steel worker and he's looking to sell his business, but he didn't really take very much time to identify his company as a good purchase target. And so now he's trying to work through that. I've got another sub who's the second generation electrician, that similar situation where he's kind of taken on his dad's identity in the company, but that's not necessarily what his identity is going forward. And so there can be some challenges in figuring out what do I want my business to look like, and it's worth the time to take a step back. And we're busy on a day-to-day basis, especially in construction. You can really get caught up with just the day-to-day challenges of running the business. It is very much worth the time to take a step back, figure out what do I want my business to look like, what markets do I want to be in, how much do I want to be working, is this a lifestyle business, is this a growth business, and really hammering that down and starting to take the steps to send your company in that direction.
One of the things that we work with some of our clients that, for those familiar with EOS, it's an operating system model, but there's a tool in it called the Vision Traction Organizer. And often we find that when working with some of these clients that they're asking us to forecast the future with them, especially, develop cash flow forecasts. And that's what we recommend to determine what needs to happen in the business. But we need to determine what to forecast in the first place, that we have to have what are the end goals of this business, because we can forecast the next 3 to 6 months from you, but we don't want to be thinking in a 3 to 6 month mindset. That we want to be thinking about what decisions do we make today, and think about, where do we want this business to be 5 years from now. And we find that that's a really neat tool, the Vision Traction Organizer, just to try to get some ideas on the board in regards to where does this business need to go, and what's the vision of this owner, and what do we ultimately need to build and forecast for. Because, if, to your point, I know construction business owners that, back home, back where, we used to live in the same vicinity together. There's a wonderful home builder that focuses on custom homes, that good friend of mine that specifically focuses on custom homes, and that's all they want to be. And they really don't want a business that is a $30 million revenue, annual revenue business. They want a 3 to 4 million annual revenue business, and to focus on these key jobs and be, and create these perfectly elegant homes. And that's their focus. And, um, so the decisions that we're going to make for that business and what we're going to forecast in regards to how do we staff up, how do we add employees, so the cash flow forecast look completely different dependent upon what that business wants to be. And so it makes a lot of sense that, the first starting point is to understand what do you really want to be, and, in 5 years from now, and begin thinking and planning towards that, work backwards towards that goal. Would you agree?
Yeah, a lot of these guys, they come from the trades, and so they're used to doing. They're doers on a day-to-day basis. They're working hard, and it's almost a fear of theirs to take a step back and actually dream, like, what is my ideal client? What does my ideal year look like? Where do I want to be in 5 years? Do I want to be sitting on a beach, or do I still want to be doing this? Most often, they don't want to be putting their bags on and hammering away every day, and so they need to be able to take a step back and really identify, why am I here?
I would say this from personal experience that sometimes, I mean, not sometimes, it's honestly best to have other people participate in that process with you. That, while we would say that, yeah, we're strategic advisors and can assist with that, even if it's not us, it's having mentorships, it's having people that can provide some input into what your business can look like. Because we're human beings too. And I think that some people, at least, in my experience in working with business owners, they can be scared of growth too. And it's just the idea of there's so much unknown and not knowing how to get there, and a lack of confidence in how to get there. And so it's really best to not make those decisions completely in a bubble, that to get outside, advice and mentorship and guidance, and just people that care about you and care about, building what you want to build, and helping you fulfill your dreams. So yeah, it makes complete sense. So I'd love, Layton, I'd really love to expand that. We've talked a lot about this vision setting, a lot about strategy, about how we get to where we want to go. One of the things I want you to help us identify, given your experiences, how can a construction business owner produce stronger gross profits from their jobs without losing all their bids versus competitors? And I think you and I experienced this with construction business owners where they're operating at margins that are too slim, that they really can barely cover their overhead expenses, and their net profitability at the end of the year is 1% of total revenue, if even that. And that's, regardless of what your end goal and vision are, that's generally not sustainable. That's not where you want to be operating the business, because even if you don't have this grand idea of having a 20% margin business or anything of that sort, you need sustainability to keep those operations flowing. And so if you're not, putting enough margin on the board, that is a problem. And so tell us, from your experience, what are some of the best ways to ensure that you are maintaining quality gross profit margin levels without losing bids to your competitors? Walk us through that.
Yeah, so I'm going to field this question with the assumption that we're talking about contractors that work under GMP or guaranteed maximum price contract. Cost plus, I feel like, is a lot easier because you can just tack your margin on it. As long as you sell the job, you're going to make your margin. From GMP standpoint, though, there's really no secret sauce. It's dependent on market by market, company by company. But one thing that I think is very important is for ownership to have a clear understanding of what does your overhead cost you. I've been around a lot of companies that they have no idea what their actual overhead cost is, and it's very emotional. They're just kind of feeling it out rather than making decisions off of real numbers. And so being able to clearly identify how much does it cost to run your business without any jobs, and it's very important that your accounting is very up to date, clear cut, that you are categorizing your expenses correctly. You don't want to be shoving too many of your overhead costs into the jobs, because all that does is it muddies up your books and you can't really assess, how much does my accounting staff actually cost me? How much does my office cost to run? Just those intangible expenses that you need to be able to look at and have real numbers for. Once you've identified what your overhead is, then you can start to make some informed decisions about how big of a job should I be going after. Have I been bidding jobs that are too small and therefore I'm not making as much money on? Versus, do I need to bid a job that's $1 million to $2 million in order to be able to spread that cost out a little bit more evenly? You might find that you'll be able to be a little bit more competitive as you're growing. You need to start bidding bigger jobs, because if you're growing your business and you're growing your overhead, but you're still bidding smaller projects, you're going to have a really hard time continuing to make the margins that you want to make. The second thing I really look for is identifying what are your competitive advantages in your market. And this can take many different forms. Maybe you have a really charismatic sales team and they're really good at selling, and that's your competitive advantage. Or maybe you're a general contractor, but you have your own framing crew on staff, and you're able to frame a house or a commercial project more efficiently, faster. You can mobilize onto the job site quicker, or your guys do really good takeoffs and you're getting a lot more tighter takeoffs on your material. There's a lot of different ways that this can play out. Another way I've seen it is I've got a client that they have their own in-house drafting and design, and so they're able to take a set of drawings and value engineer them, redraft them, and produce a better product at a cheaper price, and that's their competitive advantage. And so if you can find a way to harness that and bring that back around and either sell it to a client or use it to come in with a more competitive bid, at that point you're able to, say you're able to build a project for 1 or 2% cheaper than your competition. Well, now you can add 1 or 2% to your bottom line, and that just makes you all the more profitable.
How do you market and sell those differentiators? If it's an additional service, I think that I can clearly understand hey, you don't have to go to an outside party. We can do that in-house. That's really easy. That's a lot easier, in my opinion, to sell to a client. But especially the value of, say, you brought up an example, having your own internal framing crew that you don't have to, subcontract something like that out. That how do you market and sell that for the client to understand the value in that? Or is it less of a market and sell and more so in a factor of managing your own margins and your own costs, and therefore you would bid the work the same whether you had to contract it out, but you have the ability to manage that internally. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so if you're doing a low bid opportunity where they're seeking the lowest number for a project, in that instance, you would just have a better understanding of I can frame this project for X dollars. If I were to go hire a subcontractor to frame it, they're going to frame it for X dollars, the same, but then they're going to mark it up. Subcontractors will add a lot more margin to their projects because they have to do a lot more jobs than a general contractor does. They're getting a much smaller piece of that pie. And so you may find your framing crew is marked up 20% versus a general contractor maybe trying to mark up their projects 10 to 12%. And so that 8% savings right there might be just your ace in the hole for winning a project.
What is some of your best advice that you and I have worked with clients, especially their accounting teams, that don't always have the most clear understanding of what costs should be in your operating or your overhead costs versus what costs should be directly applied to your jobs? And I would say that it's not a complete lack of understanding. It's about that 10 to 20% to where it can potentially go either way. That what are your best practices to make sure that construction business owners or general contractors, that they're properly coding the expenses in the right direction?
Yeah, this can be a challenge because there is often competing incentives within a given team on how to account for their project. You will have the salesman and the PM who want to see the project as profitable as possible, and therefore they're going to want fewer costs put on the project. You may have ownership that wants to not acknowledge that their overhead costs what it does, and therefore they try to push some of those expenses onto the job. Unfortunately, what that does is it gives you a very muddied picture of how profitable was that job and how much are my overhead expenses. And so, in general, my rule of thumb is does that expense, can you actually track it to that given job? And if you have no way of tracking that expense to that given job, if it's just a piece of software that you're using in your office or the printer, yeah, you may print, papers and documents for that job on that printer, but that doesn't mean that you should be expensing the printer onto the job. And so I think just being willing to take a step back and say, okay, these are just the costs of doing business, therefore they're G&A expense. If it's truly a job cost, then yes, it makes sense to cost it to the job.
So, Layton, thanks for expanding upon that. What are some of the long-term methods to increase profitability in construction business?
Yeah, so coming from an accounting background, my number one thing is having a clean, accurate, timely set of books. I think that if you can start to put together your financials and close your books on a monthly basis, review them monthly against what you were budgeting for the year, you'll be able to start making better financial decisions. You don't want to reach a point where you aren't really sure how your year's been going, and pivoting or making a change or decision becomes much more taxing on the business. The second thing that I see a lot of growing businesses do in construction is they start to implement a project management software. This allows them to track their projects a lot more closely. They're able to identify whether their project manager is doing a good job scheduling the job. Is the job moving along at the pace that you want it to? Because if jobs are going slow, you're less profitable. But the big key factor that this makes a lot of sense is that you're able to issue and track change orders significantly faster. You want the change order process to be easy, to be quick, timely, accurate. You do not want to end up at the end of a job where you've got $100,000 in work that you've done, change orders that you need to get approved that you never actually sent to the customer. I'm a big proponent of fast, early, quick communication regarding the scope of your project, the timelines of your project, and especially the cost overage of your project. It's really important to keep that line of communication open because it establishes you as the authority in what you're doing. Um, but another big thing, circling back to the last question, is really identifying what competitive advantage can I have in my market. If you want to be the biggest drywall contractor, if you want to have the most projects under belt as a framing crew, as a GC, if you want to have the best projects in your area, not always the biggest, not always the most, but just the best. You need to be able to figure out what your long term competitive advantage is. Because once you're able to establish that, as we talked about earlier, if I know I can save 8% because I have my own framing crew, well, that's 8% more money that you're making on every single job that you do, specifically for that trade. If it's that I've got my own design and drafting crew, in house, that's a service that I can sell
Yep.
that none of my competitors have. And so once you're able to have that moat that you're building around your business, you're able to charge the prices that you want, not necessarily the bottom dollar that the market may be dictating.
Yep. I think, yeah, something that comes to mind that I want to encourage, our listeners about is once you establish that differentiator process, creating an appropriate process around that differentiation that, especially if it is something that can be systemized, that, you can do something special that you certainly don't want that all inside the business owner's head and only your head, that you want to get it out of your head. And so, creating some documentation around that process so that it can actually be a process that your team can execute on, and with the intention that you can evaluate the process and see how it's going and actually determine, is this going as planned, and are there ways that we can tweak and improve this to actually manage our costs that much better, to become more efficient. It's just so important that when you have an idea and when you actually have something differentiated, you want to make sure, at least in my experience, that as a business owner, it's not fully dependent and reliable upon you, that you want to build it into your business and it creates long-term value that your team can actually deploy. And it creates a lot more reliability and a lot less risk for your business too.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. A lot of times, young construction business owners, they are 100% the linchpin of their business. If they're not the one out doing something, it's not getting done. And where you're seeing companies grow is where they are willing to let go of that, train somebody up, hire somebody, and be able to step back and actually become a business owner rather than the one running the business.
100%. Yep. Um, so key question here, especially in this environment, capital is getting harder to come by, right? That we are in a very high interest rate environment. Construction businesses need to make sure that they're managing cash appropriately, because getting access to outside capital is a lot harder in this market. You and I both know that right now. How can a construction business ensure that they don't run out of cash, and how can a CFO help in that?
Well, the very first thing is having clean, accurate, and timely books. Because if you have that, you've got something that you can actually project. A CFO is a great asset to help you take your history and understand what the current situation that you're in, whether it be the market or where you're at in your business, and project that out. Now, once you have that, you can have a firm understanding. Am I going to have a cash flow issue? If you're going to have a cash flow issue, well, if you got really clean books, it's going to be really easy for that CFO to go to a bank and help you get the funding and financing that you may need. If you don't have very clean books, that's going to be a lot harder to lift for a CFO. It's not an impossible task, but if you are on a month-to-month basis prepared with your books, you're going to look a lot more sellable and marketable to financiers.
Yep, agreed. And I want to emphasize for our listeners too that, um, we find a lot with several of our clients that, they have bad experiences where they go down to the local bank, they try to establish a relationship, they can't get the funding they need. And I think, a big emphasis point here is, just like we're talking about how a construction business should be differentiated in order to create additional value. Being differentiated also means that you're probably going to have a target market that really values that differentiation. And banks are the same way, that just because one bank told you no, that may not actually be the best bank for you, that you really want to work with banks that do focus in the construction industry, understand construction industry trends, and you want to look at the health of the bank too. That, in this market, if banks don't have enough deposits on hand, they don't lend. And so I think it's really important to make sure that you've done your research on the bank that you're trying to work with. And this is where I find that a CFO can help and try to take this off the plate of the business owner is, having that access to capital, that if you need a working capital line, if you need, some type of alternative financing like AR financing, that they will go into the marketplace and try to find the best solution for you versus a business owner just, feeling like just the frustration of dealing with bankers is all on top of them, and that, they have to pass around all this documentation, have their entire personal life opened up, because most banks will look for some type of guarantee, et cetera, et cetera. To me, that's really where a CFO can help too. That, if there are cash flow concerns and sometimes you need that short term stabilization, using outside capital, that really I believe that a CFO can help navigate and get access to that capital because of their knowledge of the capital marketplace. That's not where a CEO needs to be spending their time. That what we've talked about here is the CEO or the business owner should be focusing on that vision, focusing on that strategy, and making those incremental improvements to get towards that, or to drive towards that strategy, creating those processes with their team, trying to optimize performance, et cetera, et cetera. So at least just an add-on, I believe that this is where a CFO can help add value too. So.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, especially for smaller markets, you end up in smaller communities with local community banks that may be very affected by the rates or the economy. And as a growing contractor, I would highly recommend, branching out, not just relying on your one local bank. And
Yep.
the answer may not be a Wells Fargo or a Chase. You're probably looking at more of a middle market bank where they are committed to a certain type of customer. And that is definitely where a CFO can come in just very handy, as being able to identify who wants to invest in your business.
I consider it the same thing, that, just like you're not going to have all your eggs in one basket with one subcontractor, that you want to have, relationships with a couple. Same thing, with the banks, that while you may have your primary trusted relationship, it's just not in the best interest to have all your eggs in one basket. That it's okay to, have open lines of conversation with multiple, and just making sure that, yeah, you're getting the right deal, that that you have the access to capital that you need, that if one bank, happens to have something go awry, that you can, move to another bank. That I think a lot of, business owners, they didn't expect, I want to say it was last year, that Silicon Valley Bank just completely toppled on them, right? And so your bank can fail. And so having that access to multiple different providers is just, it's in the best interest from a risk standpoint for the business owner. So, yeah. So, let's expand upon this. We've talked a bit about, what a CFO can do for a business. I really want to hear more in your opinion as to, what are the additional things beyond just access to capital, cash flow management, and cash flow forecasting. Yeah, help us understand more about what a CFO can do for a construction business.
Yeah, well, I mean, a CFO is really your financial guide to your business. A lot of contractors, they come from the trades. It's just how they get into the business. Whether it's, multi-generation family thing, or somebody who's worked their way up and realizes, hey, I can, take my belt off and do this more efficiently than the next guy. And so they don't always necessarily have a history in accounting, finance, or, running a business. And so, I've always felt like you need to entrust those who are experts in those fields with guiding you if you truly want to, level up. You wouldn't be doing, if you're a business owner, more likely than not, you're not going to be the one out digging the ditch. And so you need to utilize your expertise in a leveraged way, and you need to, rely on, your CPA is going to do your taxes. You're not going to do your taxes. Your CFO is going to be your finance guy. He's going to be the one that unlocks the potential of your business by taking the assets and the business that you currently have and being able to leverage that so that you can make good financial decisions to grow your business into the future.
Yep. Yep. Great. So Layton, you know, you have experience in a construction business, and even more importantly, a family owned and ran construction business. That you are actually a fourth generation builder yourself. And so, for the audience, we'd really love to hear more of your perspective, given your intimate knowledge of this. What advice would you give to other family run construction businesses looking to sustain and grow through generations?
Yeah, family business can be tough. It can be very challenging, very emotional. I've been very fortunate that I've gotten to not only see the day to day in my own family's business, but also I have some good friends and clients who also have family businesses. And just in conversations with them, seeing what other families did better than others. And the one thing that really stands out to me is the families that I see that have been successful at this allowed the next generation to go out and try things, even if they knew it was not going to work. The learning through trying and failing and figuring it out themselves was very important versus the families that held on real tight and didn't really allow for the next generation to, branch out on their own and try new things. Those families, once the next generation had it, didn't really have the experience that the prior generation had because they're the ones that went out and they made those mistakes. They made decisions, they got to take ownership of their decisions. And so, from a family business standpoint, that's kind of my one hill that I'll die on is that I would love to encourage all family businesses that if you've got that next generation that they think they're having interest in being a part of the business, give them some ownership to make some decisions, even if you know they're going to be bad, but support them in it. And I think that you'll find that it helps them to grow as a business owner, as a leader, and you will have a lot more success in that next generation.
Great advice. Great advice. So wrapping it up here, Layton, this is the Accelerating Lower Middle Market Value podcast, right? And so we've talked a lot about, finances for the construction business owners, how they can optimize their finances, how a CFO can help. You've given us some insight in, your opinion as to what helps a family run and family owned business, succeed through multiple generations. Would like you to finish off with us here. The key here is we want to help construction business owners develop businesses of value, that whatever the future has to hold, that they've created something of value, that, whether they transition it to their kids, whether they have to sell it, whatever the case is, that they're developing something of immense value that can help them, succeed, in whatever financial picture or dream that they have further on in their life. So tell us, what's one piece of advice you'd give to CEOs in the lower middle market, especially construction industry CEOs who are looking to accelerate their company's growth and create lasting value?
I think my biggest key in this area is understanding your value as the CEO and where you are the most valuable to your company. I think once you understand that, what your worth is to the company and where your strengths and weaknesses are, you can start to relinquish some of the duties that you may be weaker in to people who bear those strengths. And so, getting back into finance, if finance is not your thing, if you understand sales or if you're an operations minded person, I think once you've understand that, hey, this is my strength, I'm going to go hire a really good controller to make sure I've got a good clean set of books because it's just not my strength. Or, I'm more of an introvert, I'm not really a salesperson, and that's what I need to unlock my growth. I'm going to go hire the best salesperson I can find. If I need help making long-term financial decisions and projecting for the future so that I can meet my goals, I'm going to go hire a CFO. Once you know your worth and where your strengths are, you can really add those tools to the company that will allow it to unlock and grow beyond where you currently have it.
Makes complete sense that, yeah, having that team around you is key, that, and being willing to delegate and let that team lead and provide value, that, you're not always going to have all the owner or all the answers as the business owner. Right. And so having that team that has their expertise in their functional areas. And so the business is less dependent upon you as the owner making all the decisions and the shots. It's key to helping grow, but also ensuring that you're carrying a lasting value, that a business is not 100% dependent upon you, that there is a team that can continue in place no matter, what your financial plan is, as you're building your business. And so, yeah, it makes complete sense. The team is everything, and getting the right team members in place that help complement the business owner.
Now, I've seen too many business owners try to keep their arms around the whole business, and you can't keep it all together on your own. Because then ultimately, if something fails, you're just, you're carrying that weight. But if you can spread that weight out amongst a good team, man, the things that you can do are just unlimited.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you, Layton, for joining us. That, yeah, I really appreciate you providing your insight to the construction industry. I know that for many of our listeners in the construction industry, this will be highly valuable. And realizing even for non-industry, non-construction industry business owners, that we hope this is a value too. But just really appreciate you having you on the show and you sharing your expertise and your insights with us. Thank you, Layton.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to this most recent episode of Accelerating Lower Middle Market Value. We hope that you found actionable insights that you can implement today to accelerate your business value. Wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor, Brady CFO. Brady CFO is a team of CFO advisors that help business owners in the lower middle market build the business of their dreams via comprehensive growth strategies and financing that growth. If you'd like to learn more about Brady CFO advisory services, visit BradyCFO.com. Thanks, everybody. Until next time.